very, very much everybody for coming to this webinar, Going Virtual, What's Working? Pretty simple title. I know that we've all had a very challenging time over the last numbers of months, and speaking to our clients and colleagues in the industry, we've all been learning fast, very much on our feet. And today we are going to be bringing to you some of the stuff that we've learned and what's working with our clients, telling you some stories about what our clients are up to, and some of the themes as well. So quickly, we will all introduce ourselves. Let me start by introducing myself. I'm Andrew Jolly, Director of Strategic Design at Leo, and delighted to be with you today. My quote that I've put up is we learn fastest when we're dropped in the metaphorical deep end. We know that that's how learning happens, but it feels like we've all been dropped in the deep end very much in the last 6 months. It's been very, very difficult. If there is a single silver lining, it is that if we learn and share, we do get better at what we do, and so things like this really should encourage us all to pick up on where the success stories are. Sophie.
Hi, my name's Sophie. I lead the client engagement team at Leo. I'm based in Kent, and it is very sunny outside, which is lovely. I'm really excited about this webinar as I'm highly dyslexic, which means I struggle with traditional kind of modes of learning, such as reading. And for me, going virtual is an opportunity to really challenge ourselves to be brave and make a difference and not settle for traditional, but really look at creative learning and different ways of creating learning impact. So the quote that I've chosen, I'm actually going to talk about a little bit more around 3 different modes a little bit later, but really focusing on, there was a poem that came out during the pandemic around, we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And I really want to focus on that, of what we're seeing of different organizations and what they're doing, and how we can really see the opportunities in the landscape that we're in at the moment. So I'll hand over to Patrick.
Lovely. Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's great to see you. Some of you we've spoken before. I've certainly been on other webinars, leading on other webinars where some of you have been on. So it's great to have you back. So I've been with the organization for about 14 years, and I think for me, the quote that I stick with is that we are all natural problem solvers, and we respond really well to challenge. I say that, but we also need to give people the right tools in order to solve that challenge and that problem. Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Patrick and Sophie. So I don't want to spend much time on this, but many of you will know who we are. Some of you won't. We are very lucky to be part of Learning Technologies Group, which is a growing group of organizations, companies, all striving to bring learning and technology successfully to businesses and large organizations globally. And amongst our partners, you will find platforms that you will recognize, authoring tools such as Gomo, and teams that are specialists in areas such as data and learning and so on. And also our close service partners who deliver gamified learning and governance, risk and compliance learning at Leo GRC. Leo is specifically a team. We are based in the US and have several offices in the UK. We have been at the forefront of digital learning for, well, some of us at least, for 20 to 30 years. And we work in the teams delivering strategy, consultancy to clients up front in projects, and the platforms and the content and everything around delivery to make sure that those programs are effective and measured, and we can report on them and we can see success happening. It's a really exciting place to work, and it's a unique opportunity in a sense to work with a number of amazing clients. And effectively, that's what we're going to be doing today, is bringing you some of what we are learning to you. We're going to be talking very quickly about what we've experienced and how we've reacted to the moment, or our clients have, and what's working there. We're going to be looking specifically at 3 different types of client and what we are doing and what we're seeing working for them. And then we'll talk a little bit about going virtual and some of the things we've learned, some quite practical, deeply practical, about replacing face-to-face. But it's true to say we've done a lot of webinars in that area, so I'll be pointing you at some of the other resources around that 3rd area as we get towards the end of this session. But first of all, we have a question, Patrick.
Yeah. So we have a brilliant opportunity. We've got now, with all of you on the line, we've got about over 140 of you on the line to do a snapshot in time and see what you and your peers are thinking right now, and how you are adapting. So the question that we've got is, how much have you had to adapt the way that you deliver learning in the last 6 months? And so the question, is, have you stayed the same? Have you had to incorporate some minor changes, or have these been more significant or major? If you could all make your selection, I think this will be really telling to see where people are these days and how much change people are having to really deal with.
Thank you, everyone who's voting. I think we're nearly at the magical 75%, so that's excellent. Harley, maybe you can close that and we can see the results.
Right. So we've got a significant number are on the significant changes. So 45% and 41% on majors. So I don't know. Maybe for the folks on the call, do a little snapshot of this. Take a shot of that, and see if that might be useful to start a conversation internally about what you are having to deal with, and how you are comparing to your peers across the globe, because we've got a good shot of folks from the US and from Europe on this. So I think that's telling. There is a significant amount of change that you are all dealing with. And so that's what we're going to do in this session, is to talk about some of the trends that we are seeing. We want to demonstrate to you what other organizations are doing, and we're looking at from the emerging to the more mature, what's working for them, and maybe there's something in there that you can cherry pick and use for yourselves. Andrew, do you want to pick up on some of the key trends?
Sure. I mean, it's an amazing number. We have been asking that question recently, but to have 86% saying that this changes are significant and major is just showing the kind of experience that we're all going through. What we experienced was something soon after March or earlier. A lot of our clients just coming straight to us and saying, "Please help! I have all my face-to-face learning. I need to get it into a virtual classroom format as quickly as possible." True to my quote, "We all learn when we're dropped in the deep end." It's amazing how quickly people have figured out how to deliver some great virtual classrooms very fast, and we saw a lot of that happening. We then in our kind of second phase, we had many clients coming to us and saying, right, we did that, but how do we make it more profound? How can we make virtual learning better? What does a kind of virtual classroom plus look like? And we responded by going back to what we know and what we've been doing well for the last 20 or 30 years, which is blended learning programs at distance that work, and bringing all of the kind of the channels, the media and the designs that we've had tried and tested to play, but with some nuance, which is we need it fast, we don't have more budget, we need it cheaply, and we need to know it's gonna work. Our third phase, which we're kind of feeling very much now, which is a number of our clients, and you'll see this referenced in a minute when Sophie and Patrick talk, saying, right, we understand what we're dealing with now. We're delivering a lot of all our previously face-to-face courses online, but we need to do this at scale now across the board with all of our curriculum. How do we get ourselves organized and sorted to be able to do this at quality, at speed, going forward? We also realized that it was difficult to meet our clients, and we learned so much from talking to them. And we weren't going to events or conferences or whatever. So we set up something called the Campfires, which are small group meetings of, say, 5 or 6 individuals, clients, potential clients, interested sponsors of learning. And we gather them together for a series of short pilot meetings, which were really successful. And anybody who's interested in coming to these, please get in touch with us, and Harley will give you some details at the end of this, so you can. I just wanted to share with you some of the key themes that we heard then, and this was 4 to 6 weeks ago. One of the key themes was we're in an absolute moment of change. So we've been talking about that. We saw 86% of you say major shift. People were saying, completely agreeing with you, saying things like, we had a 2-year transformation program, but now we have to do it in 6 months. We have to do it fast. We heard phrases like, this is the moment of truth for our team. This is where we step in and do what we've been wanting to do for a while. We know it can work. Now we've got to make it work. A lot of talk in those group sessions about going virtual and what that meant. And as I say, I'll be talking about that at the end of this session. But immediately people saying webinars can be passive. How do we make them more engaging? How do we bring the power of face-to-face to digital and distance? It's got to be more than just PowerPoint narrated. We have to make the learning meaningful. And we also heard social learning has been very successful. We'll be talking a little bit about that, and we have been covering that a lot in some of our webinars. I think this is working on several levels, because people were pushed apart and from working together physically, and so gathering people together to learn has had major benefits in other areas. But as you can see from that bottom quote there, it takes a lot of effort to design in social, but it's something that we've been working hard at, and we've seen it working. And finally, there's a real feel of transformation. L&D now need to be facilitators of learning, not just deliverers. There's a real need to be flexible and to drive continuity in the future. So those are some of the headline feelings, and you will all, I'm sure, recognize those, especially from the results of that question you gave. I'm going to hand over now to Sophie and Patrick, who are going to look at 3 different broad types of clients that we've been working with and what is working for each of them.
Perfect. So before I get into that, I recently read a book called Untamed, and something that really struck me and stood out to me was this quote, which I wanted to share. As learning professionals, we need to stop thinking about going digital as training, but as creating space to learn. And I think this quote really pulls that out. I think our role is to create learning that touches human hearts, challenges our thinking, and creates space for creativity and imagination. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit today is around how we need to challenge ourselves around what going virtual really means. And what we've started to see is a couple of types of clients that are emerging. I'm actually not going to call them types, I'm going to call them boats. So going back to my quote right at the beginning, we're all in the same storm, but not in the same boats. Going virtual is an impact of the storm, but how we go virtual is dependent on your boat. So these are the three types of boats that we're seeing. We've got the new boats, never sailed before, going virtual for the very first time. Previously was predominantly face-to-face or event-focused. We've got the emerging boats. You know, we've sailed a few times, we've got the right equipment, we've got the boat in place, we've got the infrastructure around us, but we're moving at such speed, there's a lack of stability. And then we've got the mature kind of cruisers. Like, we're still good, we're still moving, but are we moving the right direction? And actually, what is a sustainable route for us to move forward? And how do we make sure that it's as smooth and operational as possible? So we've kind of categorized these clients into three groups that we want to go into a little bit more detail around today. And the first one is that new boat. So organizations that, to be honest, got dropped in the deep end in March as we kind of entered the kind of pandemic. Training had either been kind of face-to-face, so big programs that were being rolled out where you had the face-to-face trainers, the instructors on the ground, very practical, or they were events focused. So they were all about capturing people's hearts and minds and giving them the tools that they need, from sort of induction programs to leadership and all those types of things. This was a really highly daunting experience for these organizations, as their business models, their revenue streams, their training infrastructure was dependent on human interaction. And overnight, that human interaction moved virtual. However, I believe with great change comes opportunity. And the opportunities that I'm starting to see with these clients, I think is really, really exciting. We're challenging what learning looks like. So teaching from PowerPoints is no longer good enough. You've probably all seen in the news, wherever you are, universities, they're being challenged around what their learning curriculum looks like, what their learning styles, what learning modes, leveraging technology, really shifting these educational institutions to think about what education actually means and how do we capture that creativity, those moments of reflection, that innovation, that human element that happens in learning. I also see an increase in inclusion, where previously only a select few could attend events or qualify for certifications. Virtual increases the opportunity by reducing barriers. These barriers could be time, it could be money, it could be location, it could be culture, it could be anything. But virtual enables us to actually increase our reach. And the final kind of real opportunity that I'm seeing is alternative revenue streams. I'm actually going to share a story a little bit later around an organization that I think has been incredibly inspiring in the way that they've looked at the situation and where they're going next. So we'll move into that as a little bit of a case study. But before I do, I'd like to hand over to Patrick to kind of share what's working for these kind of new organizations that are emerging.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. So what we're seeing that's working with these emerging organizations is certainly their willingness to focus on the priorities. Now, it's not that they have a lot of choice in it, but they are able to quickly discern and move quickly in terms of priorities and where they're focusing. So they're focusing on mission critical training and support. And that's where they are most effective. That's where they are really in this mode of servicing the business, and they are doing that really to good effect. We are seeing them also define what they mean by digital, and sort of with these emerging organizations, certainly they are not looking at massive blended learning journeys, e-learning, any of that. They are defining that digital in their world oftentimes is how to run effective meetings, might be how to create effective communications from the leadership. So we are seeing these very sort of spot communications that they are doing really well, certainly around themes of well-being, employee well-being, certainly around discrimination and inclusion, and where to save things in a world where you're now working from home. So the bare bones basics around processes, we see them doing that very well. There's also with these emergent organizations, they are more than willing to test and learn. So they are trying out new ways, new approaches, and dropping if they're not working. So there's a real willingness there to see if it works, try it out, drop it, move on, and that is brilliant. And I'm hoping that doesn't fatigue them too much. That's a resilience that they can keep with them as they grow. So Sophie, you mentioned that organization as a case study. That would be a really good one to chat about now.
Yeah, definitely. So an organization that's really inspired me is the John Maxwell team. This team didn't see doom and gloom, they saw opportunity. I don't know if any of you have heard of John Maxwell, but John Maxwell is recognized as number one most influential business leader in America. You might have seen some of his leadership books. He's got about 19, and they are all phenomenal. But with over 24,000 members in over 150 nations, they are very much focused on leadership, coaching, speaking, and I highly recommend looking them up because their programs are inspirational, and their trainers, their coaches, they speak this amazing language and really generate so much energy into your day to really want to become the best leader you can. But for the John Maxwell team, a significant amount of their revenue was around their inspiring face-to-face events, their training programs, which overnight, due to COVID, were either cancelled or highly disrupted, leaving highly skilled trainers and this amazing content and of expertise kind of sitting on the shelf. And the John Maxwell team, they've adapted. They're big thinkers in terms of what are they going to do, what are they going to do next. And I think it's really their determination and their ambition that I really admire. So what they did during this disruption is they recognized that they have amazing content and knowledge that they want to share in a time of disruption when great leaders are really, really needed. So what John Maxwell or the John Maxwell team did was they identified very quickly what makes John Maxwell unique. They identified a program that they could really enhance and potentially take to market. They also identified that their real ability to touch people's hearts and inspire was based around their storytelling. And what they did is they actually recognized they had a huge amount of high quality videos that already captured a lot of these stories. But they also recognized the format constrained the learning experience, as it just presented. It didn't really give the ability to reflect or an ability for creativity or the imagination. So it was more push content than it was kind of pull. So what they did was they partnered. They reached out to a number of learning technology experts. Leo was luckily one of those. And we discussed what the video content was. And to be honest, the synergies between the two organizations and the culture alignment and the inspiration that came from their content and what we do was phenomenal. And what we started to see was actually we could enhance that learner experience, leveraging the video content, redesigning it so it was much more interactive and engaging, making sure it was in short bursts that were kind of manageable, but also looking at the deployment. So without a kind of learning management system, we didn't feel they needed one. We looked at it and thought, actually, a content distribution system will do for this. So let's not go too big. Let's not be too ambitious. Let's focus on what that learner experience is and how we can get the best experience possible. And what we did as part of that partnership is we also built the business case. And this wasn't them building the business case. This was us building it together, because we recognized the synergies of partnering and taking their ambitious content and their kind of methodology and combining it with learning technologies. So as we built this business case together, we identified one program that we could actually roll out and test. And we actually are starting to really look at an approach which is sell it first. Let's create a teaser, let's sell it to the market, let's check that this is what their audience was. And actually, we can increase our reach of that audience through digital. There's another quote that really struck me, which is maybe sometimes it's riskier not to take a risk. What I love about the John Maxwell team is their ambition and their determination that, yeah, there's a big barrier in the way, but they knocked down that door and they worked out actually how can they support, how can they help, and how can they partner and kind of take that to the market. So a difficult situation can create a new opportunity. And for them, we're still trialing, we're still testing, and we're still discussing, but we're in a place where we're really working with learners to roll out something that's going to be different, that's going to be much more accessible to learners as well, and more that can touch more hearts. So I'm really excited about this project, and that's just one example of a company that's kind of meeting the opportunity head on.
Thanks, Sophie. I'm going to move on. We've had a couple of questions. I would like to know, one of the questions we've had is, how do you decide what technologies to use for people new into digital? Sophie, Patrick, either of you want to take that one on briefly?
Yeah, I could take that. So we've been, with some of these organizations that are smaller, we are absolutely advocating don't spend much money, if any money at all. So try it out first. Do something small, and focus on the absolute bare minimum right now. So budgets are constrained. Nobody is getting new money into their training pot. So for emerging companies, it's first land on a collaboration tool or virtual tool that will enable you to communicate with your staff or employees or your customers. Get that sorted and start there. Don't go and throw money at a 12-month contract for an LMS, or think about integration pathways or any of that right now. Start with the bare minimum, because you can do things. You can host videos on YouTube, and you can create networks using social tools that are already available. Get the bare minimum start going, and then you can look at investments down the road. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. And keep your questions coming in, and we'll either answer them towards the end of this, or after it. We'll be staying on and answering some of your questions for anybody who hangs around after the webinar. So, Sophie, back to you on our second types of clients and what's working for them.
Perfect. So to stick with the metaphor, unlike new boats to the sea, merging boats already had some of the structure in place. So they've done a bit of sailing. They previously dipped their toes into the virtual learning space, and therefore they've kind of got some of the digital, the scaffolding or the technology to go virtual. It isn't uncommon for these organizations to have more than one virtual tool, pockets of businesses doing different things, other parts kind of left in the dark. Many of these companies had 3 to 5 kind of digital learning strategies that were in place. And what we found is in March, these all got activated and moved very, very quickly. The month of March really put the spotlight on these small teams. They're having to work incredibly fast and meet the needs of the business. It's worth us just sharing as well that we incredibly admire the learning and development teams that no longer have to persuade business leaders, but business leaders are reaching out saying, we need it now, we need help. And it's now not a choice, it's an action that has to happen. And for these learning teams in these emerging companies, the pressure is immense. We have been hearing the mantra, good enough is the best we can do right now. And we admire that. Good enough is good enough right now. And you've done an incredible job to react. But here's some of the pain points you might start recognizing and feeling. The teams are incredibly small. The deadlines are incredibly tight. There's a consistency around dealing with shifting priorities and how do you actually tackle that. And what we're finding is the long-term planning is kind of being hit. It's very difficult to plan right now, but also when you're fighting fires, it's even harder. So what's working for these organizations? And again, I'm going to hand over to Patrick to kind of share some of his thinking.
Thanks, Soph. So what is working is that these organizations are getting really practical. They're getting, they are trying things and innovating in ways that are really trying to scale their service into the business. So we are seeing things like with these emerging companies that they are looking to standardize their design and delivery approach. So this means for these organizations, you know, they're certainly standardizing on tools and getting rid of ones that they don't need. They are standardizing on particular design approaches. So we're seeing these types of organizations create design templates or design patterns and releasing that to their teams. So that might mean PowerPoints. That might mean particular guidance around how to run a leader-led presentation versus a virtual class session. And they're releasing top tips, they're releasing sort of facilitation tips, and certainly when they have selected the tool of choice, they are really giving some prescriptive advice on how to best use the tools that they've got in front of them. So interestingly, these same organizations are training up their subject matter experts to become facilitators. Now I say facilitators with a small f, because these are not people that are naturally trainers anyway, but then making the leap into facilitation is harder for them, but they are giving them these a set of standards to guide them, to support them so that they could run their own sessions. That way they are able to scale. And I think that's quite interesting as an approach, as a practical approach. Also, these smaller teams are really good. We're seeing that the most effective smaller teams are sharing their best practice and sharing their worst practice. So when they completely screw up or when something is not working, they're also sharing that. Because when you are training up a whole host of new subject matter experts to become facilitators, their greatest fear is the unknown. Their greatest fear is messing up. So you can tell them what happens when you screw up, and you can make it easier. You'll make it easier for them to experiment and to try when they see that the worst actually isn't that bad. So I want to tell you about an organization that we are particularly impressed with, and that's DLA Piper. So DLA Piper is a global legal services organization. They've got a really small learning team. So they've got, I think it's about seven people, and they're working virtually because they're they're working across the globe. So they've got a member of the team in each major country that they're working in. So they're not even in the same area. They have to respond to the business, both from the legal side, and they also have to support all of the business function stuff. So Excel training and all of the compliance training as well. And they've been really they've been cogitating and thinking through a digital learning strategy for quite some time. And they finally, in January, came up with a quite ambitious plan. So they were going to go and create a 3-year strategy, digital strategy, that was going to transform learning at DLA Piper. It was going to create a learning academy that was going to be a one-shop place for learning. It's going to bring in learning from all over the firm. It was going to include blends. It was going to make the most out of face-to-face delivery as well. And it was going to sort of gracefully come on steam over 3 years. And included in that was all of the design know-how, the delivery know-how, and governance structures. Well, that all went out. You'd think that would all go out the window. As of March, there was the massive change that we thought, they thought, well, actually we thought, because we've been working with them in support in the back end, that they were going to reevaluate their strategy, that this was going to change how they were going to deploy the strategy. In fact, they went the other way. They accelerated. They've accelerated in a way that's been really canny, and quite admirably. They have accelerated in a way to test each one of the main areas of their strategy to see the effectiveness or the impact of their design thinking in the strategy. Let me go further with that. So last week they just launched their digital academy. They released a brand new curriculum for their legal training. They released a brand new curriculum for business development and business support. All new branding, all new standards released last week. So they accelerated from January until now with the release of all this content. And how they did it, I think we could probably learn from. They not only had executive buy-in, executive sponsorship, but they had active executive sponsorship, to the point where the executive partner would come in and actively encourage senior leaders to participate and have one-to-one conversations to get these people to participate in the rollout of the academy. And that opened loads of doors. For the new curriculum, they actually got their in-house legal experts to write it all. So they set the standards, and their legal experts went and designed and wrote and delivered a whole new curriculum in the time frame that they required, which I think is really clever. For their business content, the business administration content, business support content, they went out and they spent the time to evaluate content aggregators and off-the-shelf content. They looked at reams and reams and reams of content and content aggregators. They selected one, but their goal was not to release loads of content. They then went through and curated only a select few pieces of content, videos around coaching, tools around effective conversations and managing difficult conversations, that sort of thing. So they were really selective about what they chose, and they've put that out there. And they're going to use that to see what is the appetite for people consuming that content, and then up their subscription for the content aggregator if it's working. They know they're a small team. They're not going to grow. There's going to be no more budget for them. So they're not going to be growing their headcount. But what they are doing is, as we described just before, they're turning their legal experts into facilitators. So they're setting the baseline standard, quality standard, for what does delivery look like for DLA Piper. So this is the quality standard that you've got to meet. If you're going to participate, if you're going to run training through us, these are the standards that you've got to meet, but it's a springboard. If you have the experience, you have the expertise, you can go further. So they're giving them all of the tools and templates in order to run these sessions. So this way, they've just they have exponentially grown their delivery agency by using the talent that they've got in-house. And then they've released the standards to everyone and socialize these standards. So they're also going through and sweeping up anybody who's got any questions, anybody who doesn't know what they're doing, or anybody who's really unsure. Then they're coming through and mopping up in individual workshops for those people to make sure that they are comfortable in using the new tools, comfortable in a digital delivery approach. So a really small team has had an enormous impact, and they are just going through and picking off their strategy and testing the strategy as they go, which I think is amazing.
It is amazing. And Patrick, you say they. I would say you've been instrumental in helping them in that journey. I'm going to move on to the third client type. There are a couple of really nice questions, and hopefully we'll have time for them at the end. But I wanted to hand back to Sophie so that we can talk about the mature digital learning organizations.
Great. So our third boat, you're afloat, you're cruising, but you're focusing on what direction's next. The mature organizations, they're really looking at bringing the ambition of digital forward, planning for the future. I think the reality and what we're hearing from the very top from CEOs is we need to be planning to be able to flex in the future, to be able to flip from face-to-face to virtual very quickly and very easily. We need to create a sustainable digital first strategy, removing the knee-jerk reaction that we've had over the past several months, and actually plan to be able to be much more agile in our approach to learning. I think human interaction is always going to be key, but actually in a virtual environment, how do we create that experience, that emotion, that practical element, and bring that to life? So what we're seeing for more mature organizations is what's ahead, which again, I'll pass over to Patrick to break those down.
So these organizations, from what we are picking up, they have the technologies, they have the processes, they're in place. They were able to actually cope with the change pretty well. So because they'd already done the investment. So the switch was easier. But what they're doing now is they're looking at their overall strategy and determining what part of their strategy needs to change now that the way that their employees are working has changed. So we are seeing them look at systemically what they need to be doing differently. So that's including now that all new training will have a digital equivalent. So that if you're planning for a live, there's going to be an equivalent that gives you the same level of engagement, but for online. We are seeing cost cutting as well. And generally that cost cutting is coming from the skills mapping to content alignment, so that these organizations are noticing that they have lots of systems. They've invested in the LXPs that surface lots of content, but to what effect? So now the big drive is, are we able to efficiently point our employees to the content that they need in order to develop in the way that we need them to? And that lining up of skills to skills content is something that is a pressing need that we're seeing a lot of. And then building in that human. So what is it about our designs that we can do to make them more human and engaging and empathetic to where people are today? Just some big pointers. Sort of, we've looked at we're kind of seeing some trends in financial services industry. We are seeing them do a lot of the systems as ecosystem optimization. We're seeing them change the way that they are doing live online experiences and making them more scenario based. we're even seeing experimentation in games and learning games.
Yeah.
I don't know, Sophie, you've got some good experience with oil, gas, and manufacturing. Did you want to?
Yeah, I think oil, gas, and manufacturing, I mean, there's no denying that there are industries that were very, very heavily face-to-face and on the ground, but also an industry that not only are their digital strategies changing from a learning perspective, but actually their entire organization strategy is accelerating into renewable energies and things like that. And what we're seeing is on the ground, there needs to be social distancing in place and things like that. So actually there's learning campaigns that need to be rolled out very quickly, very efficiently. We're leveraging technologies such as VR and AR, creating experiences that we just can't capture in groups anymore, and making sure that safety first is the top priority. So we're seeing within these organizations a very radical redesign needed to ensure that safety is the absolute paramount for these organizations. So again, it's all around acceleration, but also identifying where those priorities are for those organizations. And the only way that they're going to do that is by putting short-term initiatives in place, such as social distancing campaigns, which we've been running out from a learning perspective, as well as embedding that into managers and coaching and things like that, but also planning for the future of this isn't going to change. What does this look like for the future? So how do we become sustainable in these practices and change behaviors?
We had a nice question, Sophie, from Simon, who says, how many clients have raised the idea of virtual reality training, and has it accelerated due to COVID?
Yes.
I think it has. It has accelerated. And a lot of people seem to have pushed their perhaps ideas for virtual faster as a result. We didn't lose any, we didn't see any loss of momentum. So we certainly have a number of projects of working with our partners at Preloaded, who are our virtual reality, augmented reality expert team that are moving through right now, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I definitely would. And again, I think virtual reality, AR, all those different immersive technologies, they're great, especially for sort of social bubbles now. So you still got to think within VR, you've still got a headset, you're still touching it, it's still physical. So I think, again, for us, it's keep going back to the question around what are you trying to do? What's the learning objective you're trying to meet? How practical does it need to be? What scenario are you trying to create? And then actually working out what actual immersive technology you need. And if you need any support with that, we've actually started categorizing that with our partners Preloaded into simple kind of techniques of like, when would this technology be right for you? Because there's still a lot of things that you need to think about in that space, but to get that emotional impact and to get that that practical, real environment, these are the immersive technologies that are really going to support. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Sophie. Now, there's a couple of really interesting questions that have come in that I'm going to, some of which I'm just about to answer, because we've had a question, how do you make the virtual more human and more live and more effective than e-learning, for example? And there are several questions like that. And I hope that in next couple of minutes, I can just give you a taster of some of the very practical work that our design team are discovering and what's working for them. So you've heard from Sophie and Patrick about the journey that a lot of our clients are on. You also heard at the very beginning that there was this sort of immediate practical need to bring a lot of face-to-face into the virtual delivery mode, and for every client that's been a reality. We've been talking a lot about going virtual and the practical design kind of tips we can give you. In a short while, Harley, our producer, is going to be releasing a link to a lot of the stuff that we've done before. So we didn't want to concentrate on that today. but I'll give you the 4 main things that I would say if I was stuck in an elevator and somebody said, what have we learned and what's working? Firstly, I would say design for virtual from the ground up. Okay, it is no good, as we heard in one of those quotes at the beginning, to just bring something across from what was formerly a presentation in a face-to-face situation. The situation your learners are in is totally different now. They're easily distracted, they easily disengage, and we need to find ways to really replace a lot of the kind of human-to-human interaction we would have in a face-to-face environment. We need to think hard about our learners. So this is a really nice model. Again, this deck will be shared with you, and a link to something that we'll be writing up about this will come to you as well. We've been thinking about what our learner archetypes are in a new virtual world. So this is a really nice way of thinking about the dormants, the people who we're in danger of losing in a workshop webinar type situation. The high achievers that seem to be able to operate so perfectly well, both engaging with each other and doing that kind of internal learning that they have to do now. And then the thinkers who are very good at the internal, that are very good at self-driven learning, but may not be very good at social engagement and joining together and making and sharing sense together. And then the show person who, on the face of it, seems to be deeply engaged with everybody, but perhaps isn't doing all that internal learning work. And there are different strategies for engaging them all the time. And by the way, your learners they aren't just one of these all the time. They can move between during a workshop session. Third key point I want to make is that workshops really work. So lots of varied multimodal sessions to keep people engaged. Presenters need to become show people to some extent. You know, we're all now delivering and engaging, and we need to engage our audiences as much as we can. Workshops, which are small gatherings. I mean, obviously today we're on a webinar with nearly 150 of you, and it's very difficult to engage with everybody and be truly interactive. However, small workshops, 8 or 10 people, you can really engage all the way through. And in many ways, we're finding people are opening up in ways that we often didn't see in the workshop as well, which is really nice. There are different strategies we've seen working, people taking what was a one-day piece of learning and spreading it out over 2 to 3 weeks, which can be great, so people can do some work in between touch points, in between meeting up, or keep them together for a whole day, get people to commit to a whole day, just as they did before, and then it becomes a very meaningful, experience. And you can read more about a lot of how we think about engaging people and aligning and sustaining their engagement over time. These are kind of methodologies we work with. Finally, we mentioned social at the beginning. It is really, really critical. Now, a lot of people have said, how can we possibly get social to work in the way that we did before, when we were all in a room together, being creative, brainstorming, doing kind of things like this Lego, Lego serious play, which I'm particularly interested in. But how could this possibly happen in a virtual environment? How can we get that collaboration, problem solving, and creative engagement going? Well, the answer is that you can. It just takes a lot more effort, perhaps, and a lot more planning. I did recently go on a Lego serious play online training course. And yes, we did have to prepare, and we had to think about the technologies we were using, but it was deeply engaging, and we all learnt a huge amount. We just had to adapt the way that we were going to do something that was formally physical and talk to each other about our creative feelings and engagements in this way. So you can do it. If you can run a virtual workshop that is around building models and sharing physical 3D ideas and make it work, which you can, then I really believe you can bring that human element to the virtual experience. So we're almost at time, and we're going to stay on, by the way, for a while. For anybody who wants to ask some more questions or hear the answers to some of the questions that you've put up during the webinar today. We had a lot to get through, and thank you very much for staying with us. Harley will be publishing when the recording out to you and the link to some of the other stuff we've been doing. Our next webinar is October the 29th, and it's about capability building. It's back to practical, everything you need to know, the new basics for design and delivery in the world we're in. So today's been really about trying to pass on what our clients are doing, their challenges and their pain points. And next we'll be diving into some of the practical with you. So thank you very much for attending, and thank you in advance to Harley and to Hannah for all your work behind the scenes. We've got a few questions, so we're going to stay on now and answer them, and until we run out of steam in a few more minutes. So we've had some nice ones, and I was wondering if, having heard what I said, Patrick, you have any other further observations on how you create human connections in virtual environments?
I was just working with an organization this morning, and we were talking about, so for them, they have subject matter experts who are quite dry, and the content is quite dry. And they were asking how do you lift that? How do you make that interesting in an online setting? And what we had come to was, the fact that we all grew up learning through stories. If we could get these experts to tell a story about what makes this content so interesting to them, it will be interesting to you. So the moment, I'm sure that you have been in a seminar, in a meeting, in a discussion where somebody was talking about something that was completely over your head, was completely intense, but they were eccentric, they were engaged, they were loving the material, and you were then engaged and there with them. You were completely present because you caught their passion. So if you can get these experts to show their personality, to show why they love the content that they love, and to tell stories, that is going to be an amazing hook that's going to get the audience there with you. Now, we're not saying that these people have to come with all of the bells and all of the whistles to be facilitators, but if they are human and you're asking them to be human and show why they love this content so much, you're going to engage your audience. So I would say, I was advocating for this team to start thinking about how they recruit their experts and how they prep them to say, don't fall behind a massive PowerPoint with lots of text, but start with a smile and start with a story about what you did when you first engaged with this content, and that changes the overall pace and feeling of the session.
Do you think, Sophie, that what Patrick's saying does begin to meet your kind of original quote at the beginning of this an hour ago, which was about imagination and engagement?
Yeah, I think it does. I think that passion comes from somewhere as an individual, and identifying that story and enabling people to relate to it is phenomenal. I also think the ability to kind of look out at other things outside of work in your own personal experience. For me, I'm super passionate about learning because I'm dyslexic and I struggled during school, which actually means that my passion, my drive for this company, for Leo working with Learning Technologies Group, is because I truly believe that we can make a difference in the way that we learn and the way others can kind of share those stories. So yeah, I think capturing those stories, but actually allowing them to be very original and raw is incredibly important in the way that we approach kind of learner journeys. One of the things I fear is when we move into a digital is when you sort of copy and paste a kind of curriculum, it becomes very square peg. And that really makes me nervous because you're putting people in boxes in which that's not how the human works and human behavior. And I think that's what we've got to push ourselves to really think about is how do we create space for creativity, imagination, reflection, the emotion, all those different elements and bring that into the learning. And I do believe storytelling is one of those that's incredibly important.
Yeah. I think you know, you using the words original and raw there, Sophie, are really interesting because and I think you said earlier you used the word brave, and so well, in terms of you were telling the John Maxwell story and how, you know, you had a quote was, you know, if you don't do anything, you'll never achieve anything or something like that. But I think that sort of braveness and willingness to try things out, to be transparent and say, look, we're gonna try something different today. So, you know, for instance, today on this webinar, we are now carrying on talking at 5 minutes past the hour, and we'll continue until everybody goes. But, well, another few minutes anyway. This is something we've never tried before. We don't know if it's working. By the way, if anybody is finding this interesting, do tell us, and we'll keep going. But yes, I think you have to try things out, and you have to be trusting of each other and let people tell stories and give people safe spaces and so on as well.
I agree, and I don't think it doesn't cost much to think of different ways to test things. Well, there was one story of a manufacturing organization that we've been working with that their customer experience program got pulled and they weren't sure what to do. So what they did was actually they set up kind of bi-weekly social meetings that people could just drop into, virtual meetings, just 45 minutes that you could drop into, tell a story, explain what's working, what's not working in customer experience. And it grew and grew and grew and grew to the point that we've now got over 2,000 people joining these virtual drop-in sessions, all sharing their stories and connecting and creating small groups from that big group that they can all sort of inspire each other from. And it's incredibly exciting what social can do in the right environment. So test things, try things, build some momentum around it, look at what's working and what's not, and then the things that are working, try to understand why it's working and put that into your program.
So I totally agree. By the way, Jean says yes, keep going. So let's keep going for a bit longer. I want to ask a question that I've never asked before, which is there anything that's working better now that we're virtual? I mean, fundamentally better in a virtual context, in a workshop context. I think there is something, which is the sort of democratization of meetings. People are learning to take part and let other people speak and give people their moment in a workshop, whereas sometimes in face-to-face, unless it was deeply facilitated, you would get people, one or two people taking over. Are there other things that we're doing now that we would, even if we could go quickly back to face-to-face, which I don't suppose we will be able to very quickly, but we had a nice question earlier from Ryan, actually, who said, you know, a company like John Maxwell, when we get back face to face, what will they do, having taken everything digital? What will we keep?
You know,
I think it's yeah, go on, Patrick.
You know, I was going to say, you can take the John Maxwell part of it. What we are, you know, certainly what I'm seeing is organizations that have been historically risk averse are now not risk averse in any way. They are the bravest organizations that I'm seeing. I'm seeing small teams under enormous pressure delivering with courage and speed, very creative and innovative approaches. So we are seeing organizations move to digital and play with you know, breakout rooms in virtual classes. They would, you know, that would have never done any of that before, but now they're there. So I think we've opened up now a possible world where digital makes sense. People are practicing with digital. People now have an expectation of what they can do, and they're willing to try and experiment. I think that's brilliant.
Agreed. And I don't know what the face-to-face organizations are going to do. They probably will go back to kind of some face-to-face, some virtual sessions. We'll see. But it'll definitely be different. And there's definitely learnings from both sides. For me, the virtual space, I also think, is around visibility. I've never heard so many of my friends, my colleagues, my family know who the CEO is, let alone actually have visibility of them speaking, and actually being able to give you a company update, to give you reassurance on where the organization's going, what the strategy is. I hope we don't lose that, because when you hear your leadership, your CEO standing up and giving you updates of the direction that they want to take the organization, you feel part of a family within your workplace. And I think that belonging is incredibly important, and that community can be built virtually. And I think it's actually even more inclusive than it ever was before. I think people feel like they can reach out to people that potentially are more senior than them. I think I'm really excited about the ability to connect to others that do different types of jobs to you, and actually putting mentor programs in to get people to explore different types of skills and the way that they'd like to learn. So I think the opportunities are huge. It's just how we facilitate that and actually create, again, a space where people can learn, that we don't put them in a box, and we give them the space to kind of really develop where their passion is and expose that.
There's a question in here from Annika, which is about when you have subject matter experts who will hide behind their PowerPoints, who come armed with the 80-page PowerPoint. How do you get them to think about the online digital interactive design thinking? And so, Annika, I'd say we've got a white paper and some thinking around align, deliver, sustain, and you're going to want to break their thinking that they can just get up there and read from the PowerPoint. That if you just go to the baseline premise that the neuroscience shows that people's attention span is going to fade out starting at 3 minutes, and at 5 minutes, forget it, you've lost them. Just using that as a model to think about how they are displaying content and how they are mixing up interactivity in their session is a starting point. That's probably where you begin with them. But there is a design methodology around align, deliver, sustain, that these people need to think about how they are aligning people to care about the topic that they are presenting. Why does it matter? Why should they engage? Why should they spend the time? When they are delivering the session, what is it about the content that you have pre-chewed for them that makes it easier for them to apply it in their workplace? And they have to do that lifting. And then what are you providing them that they can use later in the workplace? What tips and tools are you giving them that enables them to remember what it is that they learned and that they can apply it in 3 months down the line at the moment of need? So getting them to think about their design and their delivery in this align, deliver, sustain approach, I'd say get them started with that, knowing that people's brains are just going to fade after 3 minutes is a way to sort of break them from thinking they're just going to talk for 45 minutes and the world will be perfect. It won't be.
I've one more thing to add to that, which I've noticed over the last several months, is actually working with universities who lecturers switch they've pretty much spun up platforms overnight, and then just expected them to understand how to use the technology. And I think with technology, there is a fear when you've not used it before of how to use it. And I would really encourage of looking at step-by-step guidance. It might feel simple, but actually I'm useless at instructions. I never look at them. I try and do it myself for a bit, and then I get frustrated because I can't do it. I think you just have to think about how you learn as well. And I think hand-holding them through the experience, how to use the platform, keep the platform super simple, and give them the tools to kind of use it properly. And also give them an exemplar, give them an example of what good looks like and walk them through it. And I think sometimes the simple steps are missed. Of creating learner programs is great, but actually those fundamentals of how to start. If you've spun up a platform and you don't have a how to start guide, think about it. Go back to your technical supplier, see if they've got a how to start guide kit. If not, come out, do it yourselves, or get someone like us to kind of support you with it. It is absolutely essential that you have a how to start guide, and I've seen it missed so many times that I actually feel for some of these facilitators and lecturers because they don't know where to start. So give them that guidance.
Record the good session. Record your sessions, and the good ones, make them available to your SMEs so that they can see what is good.
Very good. Well, I think we're going to, I mean, that's been brilliant. I think we're going to close the session now, and I just have two really nice responses that we've had in the last 10 minutes during this sort of post-webinar chat. To the question that I asked, which was, is it working, and is it really working, and what would we keep? Brian said, yes, it is. You, i.e. us three, for instance, are all speaking from experience. Like Patrick shared his learning from storytelling and how most of us learn and adapt. So what we're doing now and we're getting better at is indeed showing that this has, we're learning immensely useful things out of a situation where we were forced to learn fast. And then this really nice similar comment from Jean, who said, what have we gained, ? We've expanded our geographical reach. There's more diversity in a workshop. Without the barriers of travel, we have more just-in-time sessions. Since we're going into people's homes virtually, we're meeting more of the learner than we would in a conference room. We're seeing their art, their hobbies, their kids' sports, their pets, etc. And I think that's just a really, really nice and, kind of positive takeaway, at the end of all of this is we're all learning in a very sort of corporate sense, a whole lot of stuff about what is working all the time. But there are some really nice connections that we're making by being virtual as well. So from me, thank you very, very much, everybody, for coming. And thank you, Harley. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you, Patrick.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody, for attending.
Thank you very much.
It was great to see you all.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.